Hi, welcome. My name is Jonathan Roth. This is Cambridge House Live. I'm joined now by Frank Holmes. He is the CEO and Chief Investment Officer of U.S. Global Investors. Frank, thanks a lot for joining us.
It's great to be here.
I want to talk about China. You're probably one of the world's top guys when it comes to China. You really know what's happening there. We saw China's growth rate drop here over the first quarter of 2012. What was going on there?
A lot has to do with Europe. What people don't realize is that China exports more products to Europe than they do America. And the general thought process is that all of China's success is all predicated on the success of America. That's not true. So a slowdown in the banking system in Europe and letters of credit, which is important for commodities, all these factors which European banks have been involved with, and general economic activity is slowing down. That's having an impact. But the positive part of that for China has been a shift since 2008 to increase the GDP of domestic consumption. So what percentage of GDP is actually coming from not exports, but domestic consumption? It's gone from 35 to 52%. So wow. China is in the right direction. But this slowdown in Europe is having its impact. But I think you're going to see a continuous, like we've seen for the past several months, a series of very gradual policies to reinvigorate and stimulate the economy. The other part that's impacted China, infrastructure spending, had to do with the railway crash last year.
Right.
So there was a huge slowdown in the construction and approval process to make sure there's never another disaster such as that, especially with new leadership coming in place this year. With that, now we're starting to see more contracts being executed to fast track this thesis that they want to build what America did under Eisenhower in the 50s, the interstate highway system. They want to have interstate speed train system, 24,000 miles of trains going up to 300 kilometers an hour.
Wow.
So last year, I took the train from Shanghai to Beijing, and it was a spectacular experience. Once it gets back on track, then you'll see a pickup in demand for steel, for metallurgical coal, etc.
Okay, look, there are a couple things in terms of China's political leadership that I want to touch on here in a minute. But first, there's a lot of discussion. We're getting mixed signals from China. Are they going to be putting a stimulus out there or not? What do you think the government's going to do?
It's in process,
right?
And they're not happy. One of the three things they follow is they do follow the new leaders, the trains. They do follow how much freight is being moved around in the train system, and they follow new loan generation. Very important components, and power usage. So now that we're seeing consumption of electricity is down, we're seeing these factors, we're seeing more stimulus of loan promotion. And just this weekend, there was more articulation coming out of political leaders to fast track this process. One thing they want to do is stop real estate bubble taking place in Shanghai and Beijing, which they've done. They've stopped a true bubble by making restrictions. The other thing they did I thought was very important is they increased the reserves for banks.
Right.
Not just raising interest rates, but increase the reserves. Unlike European banks that trade at 30 times multiples, like Lehman did before going under, or Japanese banks at 89, Japan trades at a Japan trades at an extremely high multiple. China's a low multiple.
So you think China has a handle on what's going on, and they're trying to get out in front of some of these problems, as opposed to what we're seeing in other places like Europe?
And they're looking at, when they have protests in the streets, they're using these as an example to turn around and find out what's the solution to the problem. Rather than just stopping things, there's been many protests, and they've used that as a barometer that they need to create change faster and smarter. And the recent political leader, Bao, they've gone after, well, he was using Maoism, but really it was a hardcore greedy capitalist of the ultimate kind, but he was trying to form over substance. His form was, he was pro for the people. That was a scam, and you can see they're cleaning up that disaster.
Okay, Mitt Romney is running to be President of the United States. He has, I don't know how you would term it, maybe an aggressive policy towards China. He says he's going to take them on in terms of what they're doing with their currency, and also says, intellectual property rights, he's going to take them on that issue too. Is Mitt Romney going down the right track, do you think, in terms of what his approach to China?
I think the currency stuff, no. I totally disagree. However, rule of law is something that everyone knows in China is key. And what we're seeing...
You think the political leadership there understands that?
They understand it. And what you're seeing slowly, just not quickly, they're swinging to a more free market society where there's more and more rights given to people, whereas over here, in the socialistic world, we're seeing more and more rights taken away. The ability to move money around in America, Canada, everywhere else now. Everyone has to prove they're not a member of Al-Qaeda or a drug lord. It's very important to see this transition take take place. The rule of law is very important for your property rights, your individual rights, and a society as a whole. So we think that this is a key issue to push, for Romney to push. That's important.
So you think we've seen some political infighting going on there? We've seen some very high figures in China, political figures be arrested, and who knows what's going on with that whole story there. But do some of these things that we see happening, this is obviously, from your point of view, this is comforting to you. You feel like they're moving in the right direction.
It's just like Watergate. It's comforting that they resolve disasters like that, and it doesn't get swept under the carpets. I think that's what's really important with regard to China.
Yeah, unlike Watergate, I'm not sure there's going to be a pardon in this situation. I guess we'll see what happens. Now, back in 2008, I mean, you've always been a proponent of the commodities super cycle. Citigroup came out back in April and said that there was the potential that the super cycle was over. What's your perspective on that?
Not with 7 billion people, and not with people who are just commenting on the internet and seeing this incredible facility we have here. And all these countries in Latin America, Africa, Asia, they want what we have. And governments, if they want to stay in power, they have to create jobs. And the best way to create something sustainable is infrastructure spending. The disasters are Venezuela with Chavez.
Right.
There's not spending money in his economy, or Putin not really spending money in his economy. We're seeing Asia definitely committed to it, and you're seeing the smarter African leaders committed to huge infrastructure spending. You're seeing Panama Canal expand. You're seeing the smarter countries and smarter leadership are committed to infrastructure spending.
Now, you have a really interesting perspective on how, in particular, you mentioned in some of the recent writings that you've put on your blog, you talked about the fact that China and Singapore are really striving towards American exceptionalism. I guess really examining how the American dream came about and how they made it happen, maybe through the early part of the 20th century, into the last, maybe up until the last decade or so. How are they doing that? Because this is something that I know that you're taking a really close look at.
Because just like you do in pro sports, you look at the winning team and what was their model,
right.
And you start to zap your own gaps and try to go in that direction. I think that China is very much committed to that by spending their best brains to North American schools, and then they go back to China. And that's, to me, is a real key difference that you see. They're going back. You don't see that in Russia.
Yeah.
You don't see that in many of the old stand countries. People come to North America and get a great education. They're not running back to those countries, but they do go back to China. And I think that is, and they go back to India.
Now here's a question. Do they want to go back? Because I know that we had Rick Rule sitting in this chair yesterday, and he had mentioned, look, the American immigration system needs to change because these students that come from China and learn from our best schools, they're going back. It's because they can't get visas to stay. Well, or is that by, obviously, clearly, there's an incentive for the Americans to send them back, I guess.
But I processed many of them, and many of them have stayed.
Yeah.
But I would say 80% of they've gone back.
Right.
And they go back to great jobs.
I'm sure they do.
They go back to this sort of tacit knowledge which they learned and earned over here in North America. And that's very valuable back in China. If you've had experience working here and your English skills are of a high level, you immediately get fast-tracked in your job career path in China.
So obviously, clearly, there's huge optimism. If you're Chinese, you're coming to school in America, and then you go back there. The reason you're going back is because you're incredibly optimistic about the future.
How about this? What's the best-selling car in China? General Motors. Americans have no appreciation of how much the Chinese love American products. So the big turnaround from 2008 in the car industry for General Motors predominantly came from the growth of car sales in China.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay, let's move away from China a little bit here and talk about the junior mining sector. We're here at the Cambridge House show. There's some pessimism. There are some people that think we might have turned the corner. What's your take on junior miners right now?
Well, if you looked at the sort of, I like to say the change in price action over 1 year, over 60 trading days. Gold stocks, a couple of weeks ago, we published a piece that are extremely oversold mathematically, and the odds of mean reversion is like going from winter to summer. We're going to have a bit of a thaw here for things to rally. So I think that that's important. The dollar's overbought, and gold stocks are extremely oversold. There's time for mean reversion. Does it really change? I think there's a real bifurcation taking place that in the junior gold stocks and the seniors too. And that is, show me the money, like Jerry Maguire, show me the money. These companies are too quick to issue stock options faster than they found an ounce of gold. So just like these countries are destroying their country's currency, the same thing is taking place with a lot of these junior companies. They're not finding it. And big companies like the Ken Ross of the world, or I can go on with the whole list.
But why is that? Are they just being lazy? I mean,
well, they're not being held accountable. People
Right.
are not basically complaining to the boards, I guess. I
Right.
would say the boards of directors and management.
I mean, if I was a shareholder, I should complain.
I write about it. I issue my concerns to people that you cannot get stock options, you should not get them, and you shouldn't have packages of performance when you have poor performance. You should not have incentives this way. So I think that a lot of people, those more successful companies, are doing two things. They're finding more ounces per share, or they're producing more gold per share or pounds of copper per share. And those that are doing that are outperforming. And our last bit of research has shown that those companies where management is buying stock, not just stock options, or have a big equity ownership, they have far outperformed their peers for the past 3 years by 9% a year, or 900 basis points per year. So if we look at Ken Ross and we look at Agnico Eagle, very little ownership buying in the open market when they say, oh, stock is cheap, you should buy some. They didn't buy any.
Sure.
However, Franco-Nevada pays out monthly dividends and management owns a big piece of the company and their incentives are aligned with the shareholders.
Right. Gotcha. Now, gold, where's it going?
Gold is just going through this la-la land here
Yeah.
as an asset class to be as a source of liquidity for investors. And that's a concern that's just short term. Long term, I think that gold will probably double over the next 5 years because the money supply in emerging countries in a slowdown model is 16% growth. That means that the demand will pick up over the next 5 years. What's really key for this part is also GDP per capita. And if GDP per capita unravels in emerging markets, that will put a dent on gold. But I don't really see an unraveling. I see this sort of gradual slowdown, but very committed policies. And the governments in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America have much more capacity to borrow money to expand their economies.
Okay. Now, we just have a couple of minutes left. Two quick questions for you. You're really bullish on Turkey. They're obviously involved in this the gold question here. Why? Why Turkey?
Well, Turkey's done a remarkable job from running their businesses, their public companies. We have so many companies that have grown their revenue at 10%. Their earnings are growing at 20%, and they're generating 20% returns on capital, and their PE ratios are trading 1/3 or 1/2 of what they're trading in North America.
Wow.
So I think that Turkey is just a great, unique, even their gold mining industry is much more profitable than we see in North America.
Okay, quickly, you advise President Clinton's foundation on sustainable development, something that we could spend another whole complete interview on. Quickly, in 60 seconds or less, tell me a bit about what you're doing with them, because I find that really fascinating.
I think that Frank Schuster has done a remarkable leadership in partnering with President Clinton to create an awareness of the importance of sustainability in mining. And you're seeing that throughout Latin America. And I think the fact that those initiatives are actually supporting businesses that create business. It's not a free lunch.
Right.
The funding is taking place where kids are learning how to have something that is sustainable. And you're seeing in Lima, all of a sudden, all the buses are natural gas. Because they have excess of natural gas, therefore there's less CO2. Well, all those businesses that have rebuilt their economy to deal with this natural gas creates jobs. So the idea is to create sustainable jobs.
It must be really, I would think, it's really satisfying for you.
It's very, very exciting. We just recently went on a tour and going through Colombia. It was very, very exciting.
Wow. Well, listen, I look forward to, we're going to chat about that a lot more the next time we have you back, but appreciate your time.
Great, thank you.
Okay.